more minutes to get yourself prepared to our first class of today's session. And we'll have Ms. Rebecca Miller as our guest speaker. Be ready to get some notebooks, and because you'll be great students today. Yes, we have, of course. I welcome that. And do I have a clicker? Is it possible to get a, do we have one by any chance? It's not. If not, I think we're going to haveสตาฟรบกวนหาฟิกเกอร์ให้วิทยากรได้เลยนะคะ Work has been so I really do feel honored to be here with all of you this morning. It's a real pleasure, and I'm excited to learn from all of you as well. So let's start it off. Scam centers. I'm sure many of you are aware of scam centers and have seen the headlines. This is just a bit of a snapshot. And this first came to our attention as UNODC probably about 4.5 years ago, in sort of 2021. We started to get some reports in relation to people who were being trafficked to countries that we weren't really familiar with. Flows were kind of going one way. So for example, people from Cambodia, from Laos were being trafficked to Thailand. People from Indonesia were being trafficked to Malaysia. We had sort of regular corridors. And I remember getting a call from my boss one morning, and he said, Rebecca, I just got a call from the Thai police commissioner who was asking about approximately 400 Thais who have been trafficked to Cambodia. And I went, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. We've seen numbers like that in the fishing industry, but again, Thais to Cambodia, kind of an odd situation. That isn't a common corridor flow that we were seeing. But what we were starting to uncover was the scam center issue that we're all grappling with, and trafficking for forced criminality. And unfortunately, this is something that we're still grappling with today. And I would say it very much dominates my work at UNODC in relation to requests we get from governments, engagements where I'm asked to speak, and just it really has been dominating our landscape. And if I'm completely honest, you know, I've worked over 20 years in the counter-trafficking space. I've never seen an issue like this. This issue has really taken not only the UN, but governments, NGOs, communities. It's completely overwhelmed us because of the scope and scale of this transnational organized crime problem. So as UNODC, we've been doing a lot of analysis in relation to this particular threat. All of this is available on our website if you do want to read more. but we've been putting out a lot of sort of technical policy briefs and threat analyses over the last few years. But one of the questions I often get is, why is Southeast Asia such a hub for scam centers? And I think one of the reasons for this is the fact that Southeast Asia is a very diverse and dynamic region that has shown remarkable rates of economic development and growth in recent years, but is also facing unprecedented challenges posed by organized crime and illicit economies. And a perfect example of this can be seen in relation to special economic zones, which are promoted and proliferating across the region to facilitate this economic development, but which also have attracted casino developments, and also, in some cases, are also enabling organized crime groups to evolve and grow alongside illicit or legal economies across the region. So unfortunately in Southeast Asia, what we're seeing now is that transnational organized crime is evolving faster than at any previous point in history. And again, unfortunately, this has been marked by the growth and proliferation of these industrial-sized scam centers, which are driven by sophisticated networks, money launderers, human traffickers, and also now a growing number of service providers and facilitators. So just on the screen here, you can see just how some of this growth has been over the last few years. The pictures at the top, Yatai New City in Myanmar, this is Sri Kuko, where we've had a lot of unfortunate incidents in relation to trafficking for forced criminality. And it's enormous. It's a huge city almost, with lights and hotels and restaurants. There's even a pet grooming facility, I was told by one of the Thai women I was talking to who lived across the border. And you can see just over the span of a few years how much development there has been in this one particular part of Myanmar. Down here is Tai Chang, again on the Myanmar side. This is another notorious scam center where we've had many, many victims of trafficking for forced criminality who have been rescued and are trapped in Tai Chang. Again, right across the border from Thailand. And if you can see the enormous growth, I took this picture last year in June. I'm very interested to go back up and see how much development has expanded since June last year. So again, unfortunately, a lot of compounds are expanding. So as I've said, these groups really have expanded rapidly in recent years. And what they've shown is a real strong ability to adapt to and capitalize on changes in business environments, exploit gaps in governance and regulations, and also rapidly developed advanced physical and digital infrastructure while integrating new business models and technologies, including malware and artificial intelligence, into their operations. And as a growing number of governments have intensified their efforts against cyber-enabled fraud and scam centers in the region, organized crime has essentially, in a way, doubled down. And what we've seen is that they have been shifting, and there's been a lot of displacement that has taken place, moving deeper into some countries where it's more difficult to reach these networks, adapting their modus operandi and methodologies, and really moving jurisdictions, value, and capital is needed, which unfortunately criminals often work much faster than governments and law enforcement. It's just a reality. They don't have to abide by the same rules and regulations that we do. So often they're a few steps ahead of us, despite our efforts where we're trying to address it. So when we're talking about centers, it's really important to know that there are two distinct sets of victims. So we have the people who are deceptively trafficked into the scam centers, but we also have the people who are losing their life savings to these particular sophisticated frauds and scams. And in terms of financial losses, these are enormous. We're talking about billions of dollars. And UNODC carried out some recent calculations, and we estimated losses between 18 billion and 37 billion from scams targeting victims in East and Southeast Asia alone. So these aren't victims who are in North America, in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, South America. These are victims just from this region. These are your parents. These are your friends. These are your acquaintances. These are people from your community who are losing money to these sophisticated scams. The US has also done calculations, and they estimated that over $16.6 billion in losses to scams were calculated in 2024. And talking to all the law enforcement who are based here, they say that this, again, is a very big underestimation in relation to the losses. Because people also don't want to report this. They're embarrassed that they've fallen for a scam, you know? Nobody wants to share that they clicked on the wrong link, or they fell for a romance scam and shared their bank account details and their money. And what's, again, concerning is that the estimates are only getting higher. So the estimate of 16.6 billion US dollars losses in the States was a 33% increase from 2023. So unfortunately, losses are just moving. So again, this is why we're all so very concerned about this, because it affects everyone. Types of scams. Many different types of scams are being facilitated through the scam centers. And many of these you've probably heard of. The romance and investment schemes, also sometimes referred to as pig butchering. So again, the person, which is often a victim of trafficking, builds a relationship with you. They think, you know, you're attractive, you build a conversation, you develop a romance, and then you encourage the person to invest in fake crypto or other investment schemes. Impersonation scams. Pretending to be someone official, whether this is police, whether this is customer service reps, again, to convince victims to share and divulge sensitive information. E-commerce scams, creating fake online stores or listings and platforms for non-existent counterfeit goods, or things that people want to buy in order to steal the individual's money. It was interesting, I was in Singapore last year, and I was chatting with their anti-scam command. There's a center in the Singapore police force that addresses this. And they said one of the biggest scams that they were dealing with at the moment that were targeting Singaporeans, durian, fake durian advertisements. Fortunately, I'm not a huge fan of durian, so that's not something I would fall for, but of course many people do love durian. And people were clicking on these links and thinking they were purchasing durian, but instead they were having their bank account details taken over by scammers. Parcel scams, another one. A package has been delivered, you weren't home, click on this link to reschedule. Unfortunately, a good friend of mine in Vietnam fell for this. Every day, she receives packages and parcels as part of her job. She was busy, she got a message, she clicked on a link, they took over her bank account, and she lost over 2,000 US dollars, which is a lot of money to her. So all of us can easily fall for this. Ponzi schemes or pyramid schemes, where again, basically you invest money for high profits with what they say is very little or no risk. But basically this means involving paying returns using funds by new investors, and basically this is all just a big fraud. No one ends up making any money except for the criminals themselves. Unfortunately, we're getting into even more serious crimes in relation to online extortion, blackmail of individuals, sharing embarrassing or incriminating information, again, to try and get people to give up their money or their personal data. And even more sophisticated crimes are coming out of scam centers, including cyber attacks, phishing, and malware attacks. So again, transnational organized crime networks are getting much more sophisticated. So there are various forms of transnational organized crime that are linked to the scam centers. Money laundering, corruption, cybercrime, various forms of fraud. But really there's been one that has gotten the attention of the international community. And that's, of course, trafficking for forced criminality. And this is because it's estimated that there are hundreds of thousands of people from all across the globe, from Southeast Asia, from South Asia, from Latin America, even countries as far away as Africa, who are being trafficked to Southeast Asia into the scam compounds. And of course, once they're there, they're forced and held against their will, and they're perpetrating these scams. So really the rest of the world is looking to us. They're looking to us in Southeast Asia in terms of what we're doing about this. How are we addressing this? How are we increasing our efforts to prevent this from occurring? How are we protecting and supporting victims? How are we identifying victims? And how are we holding perpetrators to account? So really the spotlight has been on Southeast Asia for a very long time, because they want to know what we're doing to address this. Oh, let me go back quickly. So, I'm coming down. Before I get into it more, who can tell me what human trafficking means? Anyone want to share? I see a hand up. Perfect. What does human trafficking mean?
Human trafficking means literally selling humans and against their own wills in any possible way ever. Just like cartels in Mexico, or really much it's everywhere around the world in every part. It's just actually in normal word selling humans, which is modern. Kind of also like modern day slavery, but also not at the same time. But it's definitely selling humans.
Great. Thank you for that. Anyone want to add anything? That's a good explanation. Anyone want to add anything to that? Please.
In human trafficking, it also takes advantage of very vulnerable people, and these people are, as I said, like vulnerable, and they take advantage of it, and that's why it's kind of hard to fix the problem or help them escape, because they're in such a sensitive state.
Anyone else want to add anything? This is great. You didn't have a chance. I'll come back to you in a second. Anyone else?
There could also be like lots of ways of human trafficking. Like people think it's only scam calls, but there's also, as in like the industry, the entertainment industry, for example, like as in the MC files, you know, like people get trafficked over there by like just normal modeling styles, or just like, hey, come do a photo shoot for us, or hey, get this job, and then they fly people out, and eventually traffic models or people, just like what she said, you know, more normal people with, you know, people who just want chances to make a living and stuff like that. So it comes in various ways possible. Every way you can think of, like really, it's a problem we need to discuss about. Thank you.
Thank you. This is great. And This is the official definition of human trafficking. You all gave excellent definitions, but I'm going to elaborate a little bit on this. So, in my world, there are international frameworks. There are conventions and protocols that UNODC is responsible for. And one that we're responsible for is the Trafficking in Persons Protocol. And why these frameworks are important is because they basically help countries cooperate together and create common understandings in relation to issues we're talking about. So it sort of sets principles and definitions that governments agree to, and then we try and implement at a domestic level. So the Trafficking in Persons Protocol gives us an internationally recognized definition of trafficking in persons. And you have three elements. You have an action, you have a means, and you have a purpose. So your action is what the trafficker does. So the trafficker recruits you. The trafficker transports you, transfers, harbors, or receives you. We don't need all of these, we just need one. So someone is being recruited, for example, through some kind of means. And so this is how the trafficker does it. So the trafficker uses threats or force. The trafficker uses forms of coercion. Sometimes there's abduction. People are actually kidnapped and taken. We have fraud, deception. This is a big one. A lot of people are deceived. Abuse of power, abuse of the position of vulnerability, or giving or receiving payments or benefits to control another person. So again, we don't need all of these means, we just need one. So, for example, someone's being recruited through some form of deception. So we have two elements there. The purpose of trafficking, which is why the trafficker does it. And the trafficker is doing this to exploit people. So the definition outlines a few examples. And to your point, there are different types of exploitation that people can be trafficked into. It's not just scam centers and trafficking for forced criminality. People can be trafficked into sexual exploitation, labor exploitation, different sectors and industries. And again, a lot of these practices are similar to forced labor or services, slavery, or practices that are similar to slavery, servitude, sexual exploitation, and even the removal of organs. This can be a form of exploitation as well, as the removal of organs. And Sylvia, who's on my team, is an expert in this area. She's done her PhD research, and she's traveled all over around the world and researched trafficking for the purpose of organ removal. But of course, there's lots of other forms of exploitation. Forced marriage, child begging. So again, the protocol gives kind of overall guidance, but it doesn't want to be too prescriptive, too definitive, to make sure that we can't evolve and understand new forms of exploitation that are coming. And again, vulnerabilities. It was mentioned by a few of you. Vulnerabilities. People are vulnerable. We're all vulnerable. And for example, into the scam centers, we've seen people with PhDs, master's degrees, very educated people who you might think aren't as vulnerable as someone else, who have been deceived and trafficked into scam centers. So again, we all have different vulnerabilities as part of our lives. Some of those are financial. Some of those are the fact we're trusting people and we don't think that there's going to be someone out there who is going to do us harm or deceive us. We all have different vulnerabilities. Sick parents, wanting that job opportunity. We all could potentially be targeted in relation to this. I won't go too much more into definitions, but just I want to point out one thing too. So that was the definition for adults. With children, the threshold's a little lower. We don't actually need the means. We only need an action for the purpose of exploitation. And so, why might children, and when I say children, I mean people who are under the age of 18, why might children be different? Why might we have a different definition for children? At the back, I'm going to come running because I need exercise.
minors under 18 years old need more protection because they are non-consensual in nature. They are more vulnerable than adults.
Perfect, you could be facilitating this. Absolutely, yes. Issues of consent and protections for children. So we don't need to have any form of threats or deception or coercion or abuse. We just need, if someone is recruiting or moving or harboring a child for some form of exploitation, that will be trafficking in persons. Because we need to protect children. They aren't able to make that informed choice. Now, when we're getting to someone who's, 17, a little bit different, but we have, again, international standards and frameworks that say an adult is someone who is 18 years in age and over, and someone who is 17 and under is a child. That's what international law says. Governments around the world, of course, sometimes interpret this a little differently, but the standard is 18 and under, again, because of those protections. So over the last few years, we've had to come up with a new form of exploitation and a definition to what we're seeing in relation to the scam centers. So this is trafficking for forced criminality, which really can be understood as trafficking for the purpose of exploitation of victims through forcing or otherwise compelling them to commit criminal acts for economic or other gains of traffickers or exploiters. Now, if you remember the definition, that wasn't listed there as a form of exploitation. And again, this is because we live in a changing world. Criminals get creative. They find new ways to make money and exploit individuals. So as UNODC, we actually had to come up with a definition of what did we mean by trafficking for forced criminality. I heard cartels being mentioned. Another form of trafficking for forced criminality is also drug trafficking. People are sometimes trafficked and forced to carry drugs. There's a very big case in Southeast Asia involving the Philippines and Indonesia, where the woman was a Filipino national. She was caught trafficking drugs in Indonesia, and she was put on death row. She was caught with, again, an illegal substance. She was caught with drugs. And she said, no, I was forced to do this. I didn't want to traffic drugs. I was tricked and manipulated, and I was forced to do this. And it became a very big international case where eventually she was recognized as a victim of trafficking, and she was returned back to the Philippines. So a lot of challenges in relation to these issues. Because again, forced criminality, we're talking about people who have committed crimes, and often, sometimes they may not be seen as a victim or realize that there's more to the story than what we're initially seeing. Another question I get asked all the time, how do people end up in these compounds, especially from places all around the world? I think many of you will know this, that a lot of recruitment starts through social media platforms. WhatsApp, Telegram, WeChat, we're all on them, we're getting messages. A lot of recruitment, Instagram, all of this is occurring, or a lot of it is occurring through social media. In some countries though, we're also seeing global recruiters now. So again, people on the ground who are then trying to say, hey, I have a great job opportunity for you in Southeast Asia or in Thailand. This is what you need to do. So we also have global recruiters on the ground. And often these look like legitimate jobs, and people will sometimes even go through multiple stages of an interview process. They'll meet people in the company. They'll do virtual interviews. They think what they're applying for is a legitimate job in IT, HR, customer service, you name it, marketing. But then, of course, once they're here and they're in these compounds, that's not what the reality is. And people are, unfortunately, their passports are taken away from them, confined. Many are beaten, tortured, used psychologically. I've actually stood in a torture room at one compound in the Philippines where there were still handcuffs that were attached to the wall that they used to handcuff victims while they tortured them because they were not meeting their daily scamming quota. It's been quite a difficult issue to work on over the last few years because of this extreme levels of violence that victims are subjected to. How do they get out of compounds? Well, often victims are forced to pay a ransom, or they're meant to recruit others. So there was one case, I won't name the country, but we finally they were in Thailand, the compound that I showed you. 14 individuals from this country in Southeast Asia, finally got them out after about a year and a half. They had been sold to other compounds, but they ended up in Thailand, got them out, and when they were interviewed by law enforcement, 8 of the 14 pointed to this one young woman who was 21 years old, a part of the group, and said, she was our recruiter. 21 had recruited 8 others into the compound. Again, a question we started to talk about, was she doing this for her freedom? Did she have no other choice but to try and recruit others? And these are some of the complexities in relation to this. But 21 years old, and everyone pointed to her as a recruiter. Another thing is we know that these networks and compounds are expanding across the region, not just in Southeast Asia, not just in Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar. Thailand's had compounds, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia just did some raids about 3 weeks ago, but they're also expanding beyond this region. So Monday I'm flying to Sri Lanka to meet with officials from South Asia to talk about what they're seeing. Again, not just in terms of their individuals who are being trafficked here, but scam compounds that are now emerging and networks that are operating in Southeast Asia. So it's a big, big issue that is expanding globally. I mentioned one of the compounds that I was in the Philippines. Philippines have had some enormous raids over the last couple of years, rescuing over 2,000 people. I can't even imagine what it would be like to deal with 2,000 people in one compound and try to determine who is a perpetrator and part of the criminal network and who's a victim. But UNODC went, and we've been working very closely with the Philippines government, and we did this video, which I think captures the issue well. So let's go into one of the raided compounds. Do we have volume? Sorry, I'm going to pause. Oh. Do we have volume? We definitely have volume.
Good night. They told me I have worked in Thailand, high salary, but in Thailand, they take my passport. I knew I am trapped. They smuggled me over the border to Myanmar in a van, then through building window to the boat. They gave me materials about love scams. In their street, I live in Brooklyn. I have 3 properties. I have my own business. Story can change, but I'm always rich. You are supposed to trick the client into investing in crypto, but it's a scam.
So let's begin at the gate. This used to be the prostitution den, sex trafficking den. So this room used to be the aquarium. Aquarium means just like an aquarium. You get fish, right? But instead of fish, you've got women to choose from. This is what a typical scum farm looks like. Look at how huge the entire place is.
This is only one example of many here in the Philippines. And if you go beyond within Southeast Asia, you have more and more of these compounds in different countries. Maybe they look differently and there are different people working there, but in the end, the way of working is similar.
When I saw the scam farm in the Philippines, I thought this looks the same. Same table, same chairs, same place to eat, and same computers, same building. Everything is the same. Even the same punishment if you miss your quota.
So, this was the torture room. As you can see, there's handcuffs. You see some dry blood all over the walls. Right? They had tasers. And they had fake guns. So, if you're an ordinary worker, how would you be able to distinguish between a real gun and a fake gun? And they use this to threaten you. Right? So this is the entertainment center. This is the biggest room in the entire entertainment center. So this is a huge stage. It's 3 times bigger than the ordinary size of a condominium unit here in Metro Manila. This is karaoke room. Well, all of these are karaoke rooms. The gambling room too. It's all here. They told me at any good month, ₱1 billion worth of scammed money a week. Only the managers did well. The ordinary workers, paupers wages.
At the very back are the dormitories where people that work here live on a daily basis, where they take their food, where they sleep at night. Just in front of that, there's an administrative building which housed the administrative operations of the compound. But then in between there's one building that actually housed a gambling operation that was actually registered with the government. And this is the part that was known about previously that existed in this place. And that's also the part that was inspected by the regulator. But what's not visible to that regulator, at least on paper, are the buildings that are in between, housing a range of computers and workstations. Separate from that, you have houses like the one that I'm standing in here, where the people that control this compound, bosses as they call them, live with their families and where they relax by the pool. And it's really based on the suffering of people in buildings, that are just less than 100 meters to the back of this. But if you compare this to the luxury that's on display here with the dormitories that we see there, which are very basic and where we know that people went through them being tortured there, experienced extreme violence there, it really tells you something about the depravity of these places.
They give me pictures of what I eat each day so I know what to tell the client. Of course, I never eat that food. The model is always shopping, but I could not even go outside.
Scam centers are actually a convergence of crimes, and it starts from the fact that some local authorities, even national authorities, are involved in issuing permits to the scam centers, and then eventually it revolves in cyber crimes because a lot of these people are in fact recruited via the internet, via social media, and then it becomes a little bit more difficult because it becomes modern slavery because you have a human trafficking element to it.
I feel bad to some people. It's not who I am. So if the client likes me, I stop texting and I warn him. When my manager asks me what happened, I say the rich client blocked me. I missed the quota, so they beat me so hard.
It becomes torture. Because if that person wants to leave the scam center, what they do is that they actually force people to pay them in ransom money, which they don't have. Because these poor people are in fact very poor people. They can't afford to pay ransom, and then they get tortured.
They told me it would cost $7,000 ransom for me to leave. My family didn't have that money. So they said, if you can't pay, you will die here. I said, kill me then.
We heard from Susan, who had been rescued from one of these places. $7,000 was the amount that her life was valued with. And if you compare that to one of the bottles of alcohol that's on display in the living room downstairs, it really tells you how little a life is worth in a place like this.
How can people be so bad? How can people do that to other human beings? The opulence of those who are operating it versus the difficulty of the life that a lot of those scam center victims are suffering provides such a contrast. You realize that the lives of other people matter so much less than the others.
I know it's not worth anything to them. I just prayed and prayed. Why do they beat me? Then they let me go. I'm really angry, but on the other side, I want to forget everything. When I got to the Philippines, I almost kissed the floor. I'm here, thank you, Lord.
We need to address this problem as a region. We need to put our heads together because Myanmar can do it alone, Thailand can do it alone, the Philippines for sure can do it alone. We have to come to a table, we have to talk because the problem is regional. So the solution has to be regional as well.
That's where UNODC comes in, to work with the countries, to bring them around the table, involve all the countries that need to be part of a solution. Going forward, with artificial intelligence, you don't need anybody, you just need a well-programmed application to do it for you. And that's where the real threat for the future lies. The more countries work together to share expertise, share information, and the more countries in the region also receive support by countries elsewhere in the world and organizations like UNODC, the better they can be prepared to address this issue.
They don't care about human beings. They care about money. And that's the scam.
We shouldn't forget the suffering of other people. All the stuff that needs to contribute to making sure that there is less misery for others. So whether you're in the UN, or you're a community worker, or you're just somebody's friend, or a parent, for example, there's always something that needs to be done. People need to be listened to, and people need to know that when they reach out, other people will come to them to help them.
Of some of the experiences that victims have had and what we're facing. We're getting tight on time, so I'm going to go through this quite quickly, but as I've said, we're now seeing people who have been targeted from all around the world in relation to people being lured into the scam centers. Our last report, which was put out last year, documented almost 60 nationalities. And we're about to be putting out another report, and it's going to be closer to 80 or 90 nationalities. So again, the reach is so far in relation to trying to lure people into scam centers across the globe. Which brings me to the campaign that we've been talking about, that we have launched, called Trapped in Scam Crime. So this very much was in relation to trying to prevent this from occurring and raising awareness. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we've done a lot of work already in relation to launches across Southeast Asia, but also various events, particularly ones with universities and youth and civil society. And the campaign very much speaks to what we are seeing. So trapped, the feeling of powerlessness, and people who are isolated once they've fallen into this trap. Scam, which of course is the deception itself. It's not just about the scams in relation to the job offers that people think that they're taking up, but then of course what they're also forced to perpetrate. And then again, we're talking about crime. When I first started working on this, a lot of law enforcement that I would work with would say, oh, it's just, they're unhappy workers, you know, and this isn't actually that serious. They're people that just, they want to change jobs and, you know, they're not happy with their contracts. This isn't labor exploitation. This is crime. People are being forced to commit crimes, and it's important that we call it for what it is. So this was really, important to emphasize, and why we came up with the term trafficking for forced criminality. We've been rolling out the campaign across Southeast Asia. We very much encourage you to be a part of it. It's translated, all of the materials are translated into multiple languages across Southeast Asia, and we're in discussions now of how we can expand this even further beyond Southeast Asia. There are a number of videos that you can watch. There's a master video, which I was going to show, but I think I'll skip. You can go to our website. I know we're getting tight on time, but it really captures, again, what we've been talking to and the complexities in relation to this. Skip. We also have survivor testimonials. So we spoke to survivors who had been trafficked into the scam centers, and they share their stories. So we have 4 stories from victims, different contexts and different locations. But again, as I emphasized at the beginning, their voices are incredibly important. They shape what we need to, how our messages are communicated, how we can resonate with what we're trying to communicate, and how we can have that early prevention and also reporting and support. We also have a number of feature stories that we've done. Again, our website is very much loaded with all of this, but we have a number that are also part of the campaign. Again, highlighting the different issues that we're facing. A lot of information is there and available for you to access. And lots of different graphics that are available that can be used in relation to promotional materials. I brought some with me. We have pamphlets and pocket guides, which we're going to be handing out. Again, different infographics and information to capture the wide range of issues that we're talking about. Also knowing that some people now are knowing and willingly going into the compounds, and they think, I know that it's going to be committing scams, but I can handle it. I'll make some money and I'll get out. And I've talked to individuals who have thought that, but then once they get in, their passports are confiscated, they can't get out, they want to get out, and they become a victim of trafficking. So our messaging is sort of double-pronged in that respect, in terms of making sure that people are aware of what's occurring in the compounds, and it's not as simple as going in and making money and getting out. You're committing crimes, but then also raising awareness, because there still are people who have no idea that this is occurring. So it's important to reach all different types of target audiences. And then, of course, social media. We're rolling this out over social media, and trying to reach as many people in that virtual environment as well. We've been working closely with Meta and other private sector companies in relation to this, and really trying to reach as many people as possible. This is our landing page. We do encourage you to go and visit it, and there is a QR code that you can scan that will take you right there. All of our materials are available on our website. If you have any trouble, we can certainly help find materials, and we encourage you to all be part of our campaign. So do check it out, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you. I'm not sure if there's time for questions or not. I have no idea if I've gone way over or what, but anyway, I will hand it back over to you.
Sure, you have the Q&A session. Anyone wants to ask Dr. Miller? No one?
Everybody needs a coffee break.
Yeah, that was incredibly eye-opening. I have to say this because as I'm a police officer that works at a police station and also an investigator, I have seen a lot of victims, the scam victims, we call it online crimes, and we have to deal it with we only place the police summonses to the mule account owners, and we can do nothing else other than that. Because after we see the money trails that cross our border, then we have nothing else that we can do with them. So today, this is my first time seeing the real footage that inside the building of the compound of the scam center. It is very eye-opening that it is my first time seeing that real footage, and it is very I got very emotional with that. Yes, so.
And that's just it. This is a cross-border crime. So Thailand's going to have a piece of the puzzle. Other countries are going to have pieces of the puzzle. As you said, money flows all around the world. So again, this is where cooperation is important, connecting, all of us coming together, building those networks, whether it's students, civil society, law enforcement, UN agencies, private sector, we all have that role to play in relation to this. And we are stronger together. I truly believe that. And yeah, we all have a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, we all have seen that bigger picture. Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Miller, for coming today.
Thank you. And I look forward to popping in over the weekend at some point too to check in on how things are going over your 3 days. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, participants, we now take a short 15-minute coffee break and be back in your seat by 11:15 sharp. Let's get some break.